Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. The one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said. "Do you not think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?" Then Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled." Then everyone deserted him and fled. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, elders, and teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Everyone, this man was with Jesus.
I don't know the man.
Well, you can't fool us. We can hear how you speak. You're from Galilee.
I tell you, I do not know him.
Okay.
Immediately, a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word of Jesus had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Then he went outside and he wept bitterly. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this man-made temple in 3 days and build another not made by man.' Yet even in their testimony they did not agree." Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus. "And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, coming on clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his clothes. "Why do we need any more witnesses?" he asked. "You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then they began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him and beat him.
Upon his precious head they placed a crown of thorns. They laughed and said, "Behold the King." They struck him and they cursed him and mocked his holy name. All alone he suffered everything. He could have called 10,000 angels to destroy the world and set him free. He could have called 10,000 angels
I remember the mocking and the scourging, and I am reminded he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquity. Surely he bore our sorrows, and by his stripes we are healed.
Upon his precious head they placed a crown of thorns. They laughed and said, "Behold the King." They struck him and they cursed him and mocked his holy name. All alone he suffered everything. He could have called 10,000 angels to destroy the world and set him free. He could have called 10,000 angels, but he died alone for you and me.
The scenes of crucifixion and death that now unfold are not pretty. Let us not allow our familiarity with the story, however, to dull our hearts and minds to its meaning or significance.
Very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin reached a decision. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate.
Are you the king of the Jews?
Asked Pilate.
Yes, it is as you say.
Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things, so again Pilate asked him.
Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?
But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the feast to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did.
Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?
Asked Pilate, knowing it was out of envy that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead.
What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews?
Pilate asked him.
Crucify him!
They shouted.
Why? What crime has he committed?
Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder.
Crucify him! Crucify him!
Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. They began to call out to him.
Hail, King of the Jews!
Again and again they struck him on the head with staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him, and when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross.
They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it, and they crucified him.
Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was the 3rd hour when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews."
They crucified 2 robbers with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying,
"So, you who are to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself."
In the same way that the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves.
"He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross that we may see and believe."
One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him.
"Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us."
But the other criminal rebuked him.
"Don't you fear God? Since you are under the same sentence, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong."
Then he said,
"Jesus, remember me this day when you come into your kingdom."
Jesus answered him,
"I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise."
King of my life, I crown thee now. Thine shall the glory be. Lest I forget thy thorn-crowned brow, lead me to Calvary. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary.
I remember the mob crying, "Crucify him." And I remember Pilate washing his hands of responsibility, and I wonder, have I ever been part of a mob which acted by emotion? And have I done things that I would never have done alone? From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit.
At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. The tombs broke open and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life.